that the state discriminate themselves against them to the point that I safely feel that I can use the term apartheid or intra-Jewish apartheid between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 25 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org. Our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We record on a week of new atrocities in Palestine, Israel, the murder of the rabbis in the Jerusalem synagogue, and the endless stream of attacks by Israeli settlers and kidnappings by the Israeli army. We start with a protest in Ireland as a spokesperson for the Israeli military came to give a speech in a Dublin hotel. As you know, the Israeli Defense Force, as it calls itself, slew upwards of 500 children in Gaza over the summer. Then to something surprising, a charge of apartheid that doesn't involve Palestinians, but of one group of Israeli Jews against another. It's made by scholar Smadar Lavie, who's an Israeli anthropologist and a visiting professor at Berkeley. She says the division of Western and Eastern Israeli Jews never went away and amounts to complete racism. After that, some criticisms by me of actor Gary Sinise and what he said about people who decades ago protested the Vietnam War. Finally, some comments about the Keystone XL pipeline and some photos and commentary about a protest against a gas terminal that will be shipping fracked gas out of a Maryland port. We start in Dublin, Ireland.
Why are we allowed in there? You have to respond to them in public. I remember public? Yeah. So why wouldn't I be allowed in there?
So we're not allowed in why? I haven't heard the explanation. I don't know what it is.
Well, I have explained. You were here and I told you.
I wasn't like, what is it? Just to go in.
Don't smoke there, please. Okay, get away from the door, please.
Oh, push me out of the way.
Come on, Ashley, get out of the way. Come on, Ashley.
Stop pushing me out of the way. I am on a stick.
Well, then move then.
How dare you push
Why
me out?
should she move? Under what section are you telling her to move? Excuse me.
I want
Don't touch me.
Under what section?
You've just laid a finger on You hit me once more and you'll end up with stages just as quick. Okay?
I'm pregnant, so
I
don't you
couldn't care
dare
less.
touch me.
Well then, don't lay a finger on us.
Boycott Israel! Boycott Israel! Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Gaza!
Free, free Gaza!
Free, free Gaza!
Free, free Gaza!
Boycott Israel!
Boycott Israel!
Boycott Israel!
Boycott Israel!
Boycott Israel!
Boycott Israel!
Thank you for coming, but we shouldn't allow apologists for war crimes, and we hope to see Jonathan Mizrahi at the International Criminal Court in the future to answer for this whitewashing of what Israel did in Gaza. And we will not forget Israeli war crimes. We will make Israel pay. We will end Israel's immunity. Join the boycott sanctions campaign. We will stop We will stop Israel's immunity. We will end Israel's immunity. We will make Israeli army and Israeli army spokespeople like Jonathan Mosley is speaking here tonight answerable for the war crimes in Gaza, for the war crimes in the West Bank, for the ethnic cleansings of the Palestinians, for the destruction of Palestinian homes. There are thousands of people in Gaza tonight homeless. There are people living in the rubble of their own homes. There are people without water. There are people without electricity because Israel targeted the only power plant in Gaza. Because Israel targeted the water purification plant. Because Israel targeted the sewage treatment plant. And this is the most moral army in the world. This is the most moral army. This is the actions. This is the actions of barbarians. And I say this, we don't want someone here whitewashing what Israel did in Gaza, what Israel is doing in the West Bank, and what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians since 1948.
I'm speaking with Smadar Lavie, who wrote a book. Now let's see if I get the title right. Wrapped in the Israeli flag.
Wrapped in the flag of Israel.
Okay, close. I'm sorry. And you gave a lecture here at Wesleyan, and I just wanted to ask a couple questions. First, we need a little vocabulary lesson for our listeners, viewers. Ashkenazi and Mizrahi. What's that?
The citizenship in Israel is divided to three main groups. 50% of the citizens in Israel are Jews who arrived from the Arab world, the Muslim world, and the Christian margins of the Ottoman Empire. And they're called Mizrahim, or it means Easterners. And Mizrahim is a coalitional term or an umbrella for Yemenis, Southern Italians, Greeks, Syrian, North Africans, Indians, Ethiopians, basically anyone who doesn't come from a Yiddish-speaking country. 30% of Jews in Israel are Ashkenazim, and these are Jews who came from Yiddish-speaking countries, and 20% are Palestinians with Israeli citizenship. They call themselves Arab 48 or 48 Arabs to commemorate the Nakba. And they are the remnants of a larger population that has been ethnically cleansed by the Zionist regime to make room for Israel that was carved out of Palestine.
And I should clarify, you're Israeli yourself.
I have Israeli citizenship and American citizenship. And I'm a Hafi, actually. My father is Lithuanian and my mother is Yemeni, though when Israelis look at me, they don't see any traces of my blonde, green-eyed father. So I'm just being treated as a Schwarze, or a black in Yiddish.
So let's get into that. So from the lecture, the Mizrahim are very unhappy. They feel they're being mistreated and really racially discriminated. Did I get that right?
Yes. However, they love the state of Israel as a Jewish homeland for the Jews. And that's the biggest paradox of Mizrahi existence, that the state discriminates themselves against them to the point that I safely feel that I can use the term apartheid or intra-Jewish apartheid between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim. However, the Mizrahim take the scraps that the Ashkenazi hegemony offers them, and they have a love affair with the Jewish state in Palestine.
But you also said this summer things had gotten so desperate that before the Gaza fighting, there were some pretty radical things that were being talked about, being planned. What was that?
In the 70s, there was a movement called the Black Panthers. They took their name from the Black Panthers of Oakland. They were based in Jerusalem. And they were basically asking for racial and class justice, because class and race in Israel completely overlap. Most of the lower classes are Mizrahim, the upper classes are Ashkenazim. So there is a new group of younger Mizrahim who call themselves Halo Nechmadim, or the non-cute, because Golda Meir at the time called the Black Panthers of Jerusalem, all of what you could say about them is that they were not cute, as they put most of the ghettos and barrios of Israel on fire. So Halo Nechmadim, or the non-cute, planned to go to the streets and demonstrate against the cost of living, being priced out of their apartments, lack of public housing, having their homes foreclosed, and so forth. And they actually got organized to have quite a violent resistance. And whoops, then Gaza happened. And for most Israelis, they connect between Israel warmongering against the Arab world. Nowadays, it's mainly against Palestinian civilians, and internal intra-Jewish racial strife, that the war comes and creates a facade of national unity, and people will not get their racial justice agenda, but they will think of themselves as the last frontier of Jews protecting the Jewish homeland.
And you implied in your talk that part of the reasons for the attack on Gaza had to do with preventing this Mizrahi uprising, if I might use that word.
Yes. It has. I trace in my book how social unrest that has racial basis inside the Jewish citizenry of Israel, that is Mizrahi Ashkenazi, when the leaders of the regime feel like the society is like starting to burst at the seams, they will create a provocation against an Arab country or against the Palestinians, or let a suicide bomber slip through or a kidnapper slip through, and then the whole country will be united under what we call in Hebrew Am Echad, Lev Echad, one people, one heart, and the social problems will go to the back burner, and it's a good way to squelch resistance that is race-related.
Last question. For people, human rights activists concerned about treatment of Palestinians, you had some advice, and let's see if I can get it right, that people should get involved with practicalities, not just talk about one state equality, but really talk about what it would be like day-to-day practical matters.
Yes, yes. The two-state solution is being joked about in Israel as a J Street solution, or the American Jewish solution, or the White House solution. It can't be maintained because many Israeli cities which were inside the pre-67 border have grown as cancers into Palestinian territory, and there are many people who go there because of inexpensive housing, which is being subsidized. So Israelis know that the only way to go is one state. They have a choice between an apartheid state, which most of them will prefer, because that will preserve the Jewish dominance and hegemony over mandatory Palestine, and will allow them to be the superior group using the apartheid roads for Jews only to move between the West Bank and inside Israel, mainly in the center, because the center is where all the jobs are. When being pushed to the wall, many Mizrahim will say, okay, we have nowhere to go. Ashkenazim have gradually equipped themselves with European Union passports, and now there are about over 1 million Ashkenazim with European Union passports, because they know that they use it as a security parachute, because they know that Israel cannot continue to have these bloodletting cycles. Mizrahim don't have such an option. And for a Mizrahi, it's not an option to go back to Tunisia or to Iraq, given the dream of many people, say from North Africa, is to immigrate to France for jobs and education. So actually, Mizrahim support a one state. And if it's not going to be an apartheid state, they say, well, okay, give us like the practicalities of life in the one state so we know that our rights are secured. what's going to be
So
the
that they
language.
could continue to speak Hebrew and have their religion.
And live where they live, which is in the very big West Bank settlements. And these settlements will not go away in a two-state solution. So what needs to be done is to start thinking about how the return is going to happen, the Palestinian right of return, where the refugees will be settled. There is presently only one brave project of geographer Salman Abu Sitta called the Atlas of the Return. But what's going to be family law like, given that these societies are very conservative as far as marriage and reproduction? Is it going to be Jewish family law, Sharia family law, secular family law? What's going to be the laws of marriage and divorce, the laws of inheritance? How voting precincts are going to be designed? How people are going to have religious freedom? What are going to be the rights of sexual minorities like gays and lesbians? What are going to be the water rights? What's going to happen to all of the Histadrut or labor union big factories that were sold to private investors who were friends of the regime? They're probably going to be nationalized. Who's going to run them? What's going to be the law of land ownership? So for Mizrahim to think forward and have a vision, Palestinians need to talk about the practicalities of the one state. So, because for the time being, it's very worthwhile for Mizrahim to take the scraps that the Ashkenazi Zionist regime throws to them, because they don't have alternatives.
Thank you very much for talking.
Thank you.
You know, the actor Gary Sinise, he's on some big network crime show. He was also the Colonel Dan of that movie, Forrest Gump. I was looking at an AARP magazine just before Veterans Day and saw he wrote an article there. I started reading it and was stunned to see that he begins it by recirculating an old lie. A lie that anti-war Vietnam protesters spit on returning U.S. soldiers. It's utter BS. The charge was refuted years ago. Jerry Lemke wrote a whole book on it called The Spitting Image. I had interviewed Lemke several years ago. So after reading the article, the first thing I did was repost that interview, and you can hear it on our podcast. And then I wrote this comment under the online version of Sinise's article. Sinise starts this piece with a libel against thousands of people who protested U.S. involvement in Vietnam, claiming that they spit on soldiers. It's complete bull. A whole book was written about the charge. It was found to be baseless, mostly politically motivated. See an interview with the author of The Spitting Image here, and then I link to the podcast. In fact, it doesn't even make sense, as protesters were recruiting soldiers to join them, with much success. Sinise performed in the Hollywood feel-good version of Forrest Gump. He ought to read the original book, Forrest Gump. The Gump of the book becomes one of the anti-war veteran protesters. Sinise helps injured vets. Good for him. But did it ever occur to him that the reason we have thousands and thousands of injured vets and vet suicides is because our government constantly launches foolish imperial wars, and because Hollywood spews out endless feel-good movies about war? I urge you to listen to my interview with Jerry Lemke. Here's a bit of it here.
There are many of these stories around, and yet there's no documentation on them. There's no photographs. There's no news reports or things that I've looked for. Nothing like that.
The last thing about Forrest Gump, the book and its sequel, Gump and Company, are actually great comic anti-war novels. I wrote about the books some years ago. You can still read the article on our website in the section, The Fiction Front. Now, courtesy of Democracy Now!, an interview with Matthew Hoh, a veteran of our invasion of Iraq and a former State Department official. He talks about the costs of war on our troops, especially the incredible number of veteran suicides.
You write on your website, quote, "In 2007, after my second deployment to Iraq, PTSD and severe depression took over my life. I began by trying to drink myself to death. Thoughts of suicide became common until they were a near daily presence by 2011. That was what you said. As the nation commemorates Veterans Day tomorrow, what do you want people to understand about the impact of war on those who serve?
You know, with this recent and I appreciate you bringing it up, Amy, and certainly just if anyone is listening or watching, you can contact me through my website, and I'm happy to talk about my own struggles with PTSD, with alcohol abuse, with suicidality, because other people helped me, and that's how we survived this. You know, the costs of these wars, I think, are something that's hidden, Amy. The suicides are a constant in the veteran community. This is something that has always occurred. I don't like using the term epidemic because that implies that it's somehow worse now than it was before, and I don't think that's ever been the case. I think men and women coming home from war have always been afflicted with suicide. But we're at the point now
What
where
are the numbers per day? Do you know?
The numbers yes, the numbers are quite striking, and these numbers are conservative because we don't have full data from all the states. It was only a couple of years ago, Amy, that the Veterans Administration actually started tracking veteran suicides on a national level. But right now we're looking at least 22 veterans kill themselves every day. More than 2 of those veterans every day who kill themselves are Iraq or Afghanistan veterans. Those numbers will climb as those veterans get older. But what that means for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans is that more veterans have killed themselves after coming home from Iraq or Afghanistan than have been killed in combat in Iraq or Afghanistan. And as I said, we can expect those numbers to climb. The things I have seen, it's been explained to me that over the course of our lifetime, Iraq and Afghanistan vets, 1 in 5 veterans who saw combat in Iraq or Afghanistan will attempt to kill themselves.
I mean, these are astounding figures, 22 veterans a day in the United States.
At least, Amy, at least. And I say at least because as of now, we have only about 30 states contributing data to the Veterans Administration on how many veterans kill themselves.
More than 8,000 a year.
Exactly. And that's what we know of. Again, that's what we know of. It's 8,000 a year. It's been always said within the veterans community that if you were to build a Vietnam Veterans War Memorial for those who killed themselves after they came home from Vietnam, that memorial would be longer than the memorial we have in Washington, D.C. with its 60,000 names on it. I just had a friend of mine, one of my former officers, one of my lieutenants, just texted me yesterday to tell me one of his former Marines tried to kill himself, shot himself in the head, and that kid, that young man, is now brain dead. And this is something that in the veteran community, we all know this. We see this. It's experienced. And so the importance is, how do you get help? And the problem is like, and as you mentioned when you read from my website, the problem is that we don't get help until we hit rock bottom. And that seems to be another constant in this, is that
it looks like we just lost Matthew Hoh, former State Department official who resigned in protest over his post, the satellite in Raleigh, North Carolina. Matthew Hoh quit in 2009. Prior to his assignment in Afghanistan, he served in Iraq from 2004 to 2005. He worked with a State Department Reconstruction and Governments team there from 2006 to 7. He worked as a Marine Corps company commander in Anbar province. He's now a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy.
You may recall a couple of years ago, top climate scientist James Hansen said that if the Keystone XL pipeline was built and the tar sands taken out of Canada and the oil burned, it would be game over for the climate. There's renewed pressure from the fossil fuel criminals to build that Keystone XL pipeline, and only the pressures from the climate activists are preventing that catastrophe. Now you will see an example of a struggle to preserve the climate. It's not about Keystone XL, but about methane gas produced by fracking. There was an early morning demonstration in Lusby, Maryland, to oppose the building of an East Coast gas export center. We have a sound interview with Rochelle Brown, over which we'll show photos of the protest.
So tell me a little bit about the Cove Point Terminal and why you're here protesting it today.
So what is currently here right now is an import terminal that was built back in the 70s. And Dominion Resources, which is a Virginia-based company, wants to turn it into an export terminal. It would be the first export terminal on the East Coast, and so it would be drawing gas from the Marcellus Shale, basically all throughout Appalachia.
Would this be gas that was extracted through fracking?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
And where would it be exported to?
All of the gas that is going through Cove Point, Dominion doesn't own the gas, it's a pass-through facility, but all of the gas is going to go to India. It's been sold to Gale of India and Sumitomo of Japan.
So we're here in Lusby right now. How is this terminal slated to impact residents of Lusby?
There are a lot of ways that it will impact residents of Lusby. Definitely the most severe possibility is an explosion. And nobody is really, local residents really haven't gotten answers on what the magnitude of that could be. But past experience suggests that it could be really catastrophic because liquefied natural gas is very volatile. Definitely the people who are located in certain subdivisions, their only evacuation route would actually be through the zone of greatest danger. They would have to drive towards the terminal. And then, there are thousands of people nearby who would, who could also be affected, could be injured, harmed, killed. But even aside from that, there's, there's the fact that there's going to be squeezed into this, space at the terminal, at the currently existing terminal. All of this equipment, it's going to be loud. There's going to be a lot of truck traffic. There's going to have to be trucks going in and out, carrying dangerous materials. And where we are right now is we're not actually at Cove Point. We're in Solomons, Maryland, and the reason we're here is because Dominion needs to bring in equipment that's too big to bring in on the highways. And so they're actually building a pier here in order to bring in the equipment that's too large to bring in by land. And in order to do that, they actually have to disturb a natural oyster bar and really mess up the local ecosystem. So, and that's just a selection. There's pages and pages of possible impacts.
So I see people holding signs saying, saying Rhode Island stands with Lusby, West Virginia stands with Lusby, and it looks like somebody just walked in with a giant eviction notice and got arrested. Could you explain what's happening today?
Absolutely. Well, first I want to note that this follows on the heels last week of two actions in which people were arrested. Somebody locked down to a piece of construction equipment on Monday, and some people who, from the Beyond Extreme Energy Week of Action, walked onto the site and were arrested. And really, that was a great demonstration of the depth of the opposition. And today, what's happening here is really a taste of the breadth of their communities and their lives.
Okay. And what group are you with?
I'm with a group called Stopping Extraction and Exports Destruction, SEED.
You may have noticed that one of the signs created by protesters was a mock eviction notice. One resident of Lusby, named Leslie Garcia, carried that sign onto the property of the Dominion Company. She was arrested.
Let her deliver! 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 Let
Let her deliver! Let her deliver! Let her deliver! Let her deliver! He's not the one who gets arresting!
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.